It was considered the chemical lobotomy. Instead of cutting off the frontal lobes of the brain with an ice pick, you didn't have to do that kind of surgery. You could do it with a drug.
Thorazine proved so lucrative in immobilizing patients exhibiting unwanted behavior that its maker, SmithKline and French, organized a major promotional campaign around the drug, including paying influential psychiatrists as speakers, organizing media campaigns, and even producing national television shows, a prelude to the mass drug marketing we see all around us today.
Thorazine at that time was thought of as a miracle because it was able to reduce the symptoms of psychosis and schizophrenia at that time that they knew about it, and it emptied all of the psychiatric housing units.
The campaign was wildly successful. SmithKline and French's income soared by over 500% in the following 2 decades, with Thorazine supplying over a third of the drug company's revenues in 1970. Eventually, an estimated 250 million people worldwide had been on Thorazine and drugs in its class, 23% more than the entire population of the United States. The floodgates had been opened. SKF and the psychiatrists on its payroll had proved that through marketing, there could be big money in psychiatric drugs. But it wasn't long before Thorazine was revealed to have problems of its own.
Thorazine chronically led to really serious problems such as tardive dyskinesia, which is a movement disorder that's very, very bothersome, and supposedly it's irreversible.
The tongue darting, the muscle jerking, the eyes rolling back in the head.
Most people were sometimes permanently damaged by it. So they were going to have to live their life with this neurological problem that was actually created by the pharmaceutical industry with their medication.
Because Thorazine so hindered mental functioning, its use had to be limited to institutions. But with big money at stake, the race was on to discover a psychiatric drug that could be taken out of the institutions and into the hands of a much wider, vaster, and more lucrative market, the general public.
Since they were emptying the institutions of all these psychotic patients with the advent of Thorazine, now they had to find different ways to treat people. So what better way than to go into the community and have an office and bring in your everyday person, or your executive under high stress, or mama who's taking care of all the kids, and they needed some way to create a therapy for them.
In 1955, that drug was approved. Its name was Miltown, the first of the so-called minor tranquilizers. But to sell their new class of psychiatric drugs to the public, psychiatrists and drug companies first had to reposition them as working on a disease process, rather than just as sedating or restraining agents for undesirable human behaviors, as Thorazine had been. To do this, they began a marketing blitz on their colleagues, placing print advertisements in professional publications, such as the American Journal of Psychiatry. Prominent psychiatrists were then hired to spread the word to the rest of the medical field. Few knew that Nathan Kline, one of the most influential psychiatrists of his time, was being paid by the drug industry when he proclaimed that tranquilizers such as Miltown were equal in importance to the introduction of atomic energy, if not more so. Free samples were shipped to psychiatrists and physicians to get patients started on the drug. A year later, the marketing rollout hit the public, and Miltown soon became the first blockbuster psychiatric drug, not just for those incarcerated in an insane asylum, but for the mainstream public. Miltown was marketed to pregnant women, stay-at-home moms, and busy white-collar office workers, who called it executive Excedrin.
So it opened up a door for community-based mental health, whereby the psychiatrist could then have a role. So they became very closely associated with the pharmaceutical industry, and they were demanding as well to come up with better things for mom and pop and the executive and the superstar Hollywood actress or actor And soon, it became a fashion to take some of these medications.
By the 1960s, 36 million prescriptions for Miltown had been filled in the United States alone, accounting for $200 million in sales, an amount unheard of at that time for any psychiatric drug. Miltown's success led to the introduction of many more psychiatric drugs aimed at the general public throughout the 1950s and 60s. One such drug was Valium. Launched to the delirious acclaim of psychiatrists and the press, Valium was so widely prescribed to stressed-out housewives that it even acquired a nickname, Mother's Little Helper. Lost amidst this hoopla was strong and well-documented early evidence that tranquilizers also came with serious, life-changing side effects. Miltown, for example, was soon labeled by the 1962 President's Advisory Commission on Narcotic and Drug Abuse as more dangerous and addictive even than cocaine or methamphetamine, and fell quickly out of use. But the psychiatric community ignored these warnings. Pandora's box had been opened, and with their new pills, they were no longer caretakers of the insane. They were real doctors administering drugs to patients, and their backward logic was, if the drugs did indeed shut down mental symptoms, weren't they therefore addressing some physical disease in the brain? Within years, this reasoning enabled psychiatry to undergo a profound change. Psychiatrists were no longer caretakers, they were doctors. Mental complaints were no longer psychological, they were symptoms of disease. And to treat them, psychiatrists wrote them prescriptions.
It's all about money. The use of writing prescriptions and having an income from people coming in and getting their prescriptions and this, that, and the other is what revived the psychiatric community. It was the thing that put them back where they were earning money again.
Business was going so well that a group of prominent psychiatrists met in Puerto Rico in 1967 to lay out the expansion of psychotropic drug use for the year 2000. According to organizing psychiatrist Dr. Wayne O. Evans,
psychomedication is now an accepted way of life, and the search for the just right pill has become the goal for many people.
By the early 1980s, Valium had become the most widely prescribed drug of any kind in the Western world. In 1978 alone, nearly 2.3 billion tablets sold, enough to medicate 1/2 of the world population. The business of psychotropic drugging had gotten so out of hand that at a 1979 hearing on the use and abuse of benzodiazepines, one United States senator commented that
the whole pitch appears to be to sell, market, sell, and market.
But bigger things were yet to come.
The next drug that became a rage was Prozac. And of course, Prozac was not for anxiety, but for depression. And all of a sudden, the diagnosis of depression starts multiply. The number of people who are diagnosed as being depressed starts multiplying substantially.
Prozac was released amid great fanfare, with tales of miraculous recoveries, sick minds made well, and ruined lives restored. And all with almost no side effects or addiction, or so its manufacturer claimed. Many new antidepressants quickly followed, also pitching instant psychological relief with little downside. And with this, mainstream psychiatry abandoned psychotherapy for pharmacology forever. In a bold and effective marketing coup, the world was told that these new antidepressant drugs were not just for the depressed, but lifestyle drugs for a choose-your-mood society. But almost immediately, evidence emerged that claims of universal safety and effectiveness were far from the truth.
The adverse side effects of this class